Welcome to the Honest Health Podcast with your host, Jeffrey Burke. Honest Health brings you the brightest minds in the natural products industry, as well as athletes and entertainers. Jeff will keep you entertained and informed while educating on how to be successful on your healthy journeys. Now, here's your host, Jeffrey Burke.
Hello and welcome back to the Honest Health Podcast. My name is Jeffrey Burke. I'm so glad you're here. This platform, it is the platform that brings you the most up-to-date, groundbreaking information from some of the best minds and knowledge within the natural products industry. And something new, as well as voices outside the industry, all of them with great messages and stories to share. Hey, if you like what we're doing here, consider giving us a like, a share, or subscribe on both Spotify and my YouTube channel. Better yet, do all three. You're going to love my guest today. Rob Seeman is back with us again. You're going to love the description of the program. You can read all about him as well there. And I think you're going to enjoy this multi-talented individual. And I think you're going to definitely enjoy today's topic. Hey, Rob, how you doing?
Hey, Dr. Jeff, thank you for the kind words. It's great to be back on Honest Health.
I'm so glad you're here. You know, we've done shows together before, and I think it's wonderful when you find people that have this amazing amount of passion. And I will say that in our industry, there's a lot of passionate people. And thank goodness. And I'm starting to see younger people coming in, and I'm actually seeing energetic and passionate younger people. And that to me it's promising.
Yeah, there is a next generation of natural health, coming behind us as we came behind, walking in the footsteps of some of the luminaries we talk about and that luckily you still get to interact with, as you were kind of talking about with all your great interviews that you've done. I'm always honored to be on, and I'm always honored to watch your podcast and see, the great guests that you have on from just throughout the history of this amazing industry.
Thank you so much. It's all a blessing. And, it's funny today, I had so many guests on my radio show for over 4 decades. So now I'm giving them all guilt and they're all coming on the podcast. So guilt is a fun thing. So it's wonderful to have them back again because, things have changed. Their viewpoints have maybe changed. The industry, the world has changed. So it's kind of nice to bring people back and hear their take today on what's going on.
Yeah, I know my position or view of things has changed, and hopefully, if we're growing as people, we're evolved. We have an evolving viewpoint on things, and sometimes in things like natural products, it changes and it shifts. But I think for both of us, it never wanes. I know that it's a growing passion, even though it's changing and evolving, and the industry is changing and evolving quite a bit.
Absolutely. And over the years, what has changed are topics that I've got on my shows. And, I'm probably guilty to say that I've done lots of shows on vitamins, individual vitamins, nutrients, herbs, amino acids, weight loss, allergy, you name it, bodybuilding supplements. I've done so many shows on those. And I will say that I have done the least amount of shows on minerals. And, we were talking previously, I get asked all the time, if you were going to a desert island and you're going to be there for a year and you could only take one individual or one multi-combination of nutrients, what would you take? And I always say minerals, because that way I can ensure health for my whole body, my skeletal, my muscle system, my brain, everything, because I'm sure I'll find something green there that'll give me some chlorophyll on the island. But I don't think, number one, we talk about minerals enough. I don't think we understand the importance of minerals. I don't think we understand the different sources and places where minerals come from. And I don't think we really understand the need for minerals within our body because of just living or because of state of everything and our lifestyle choices.
Well, yeah, I think minerals are so important. And you're right. Most people could name at least 1 or 2 vitamins, right? If nothing else, they know the A, B's, C, D. But with minerals, I bet if you took a random, group of people, they could probably name maybe 1, 2, 3 at best.
Agreed. and they're so important. And, somewhere along the line, and I think this goes way back to probably the 80s and maybe 90s, when multiple vitamins started to make their appearance and they started labeling them as multivitamin, multi-mineral formulas. I think a lot of people thought, well, I'm getting everything I need here. But what they should have done is labeled multiple assortment of vitamins with a little bit of minerals to help you digest them.
Yeah.
That's what they should have done, but they planted that seed. It's been kind of hard to approach it from a different angle. But if you think about where we are as a nation, there was a time when I first started that we would never talk to an adult unless they were well over 60 about calcium or magnesium or
Yeah.
potassium. And they had to be heavily anemic to ever talk to them about iron. And now we have people in their 20s and 30s who are testing with DEXA scans. They're finding out that they have the bones of a 60 or 70-year-old, or people are having fractures from weak bones. And we look at our diet, which is very denatured, and soil that has very little in it. So unless you're bringing the minerals in by special delivery and supplement, chances are you're not getting them from your diet.
Well, and I think, when you look at that lack of minerals in the soil, the lack of minerals in the diet, which are interrelated, right? If there's no minerals in the soil, they're not going to be in the food that comes out of it.
True.
And, that evolutionary U-turn, I think of, it's kind of like the butter to margarine kind of point where you look back and you go, oh, that was one area where we went wrong. And I think it was when Big Agra started using NPK fertilizer. So they're just taking these three elements, right? And they're saying that's all you need to grow big plants and plants that'll make us lots of money. Gosh, why did God or nature even bother to put these other 70 plus minerals in there? That must have just been foolishness or wastefulness. We didn't need that stuff. Just throw that away. And like a Woody Allen movie, we'll grow giant, cucumbers that have nothing in them, and yeah, evolutionary U-turn, right? Because, if it's been done a certain way, regenerative agriculture, as you and Kokora and many great people in this industry are focusing on, we knew about this for thousands of years, and we took an evolutionary U-turn, and that led to lack of vitamins, lack of minerals, lack of quality of life, all these things. I don't want to get too negative, like it's so bleak and dark. I think the great story is that we're rediscovering, and if you look back just 200 years, were there more trace minerals in the soil when people took care of the soil and they did crop rotation, when they used natural fertilizers like compost, and the plants regenerated those minerals? So every year you had minerals because you were using compost as fertilizer, and even things like manure, are continuing that cycle. So we've gotten away from all that stuff, and that was our U-turn, and now we need to, come 360 and make another U-turn and get going back in the right direction,
I've been doing this for so long that I was actually in the industry when organic dropped. It was like the thing. It was like on the news. It was like in the papers. Organic. It was a way of eating vegetables and fruits and crops that had no pesticides, no chemicals, and the nutritional value was so much more at that time that if you ate an organic fruit or vegetable, you taste the difference. There was something there. The hard part was affording it, because not everybody could fit it in their every monthly day budget. So for the longest time, it was like the recommended choice because it made sense and it was healthy. So here we are 40 some odd years later, and we still have organic. There's still no pesticides, no chemicals, healthy as they could possibly be, but we haven't tended to the soil. We haven't taken care of the soil. We haven't replenished. We've overcropped. We've not rotated our crops. We've overtilled. And the problem with it is you still are getting crops that don't have those chemicals, which is fine. But the thing is, their nutritional value is little to none. You're not getting much more nutrition like you were before. So, of course, the next step, per your comment, is regenerative. Because with regenerative, you still follow the organic, but now you're taking care of the soil and you're protecting the earth and the planet for today, for next week, next month, next year. So that's kind of the difference. But I really do believe that minerals are things that are definitely missing in our diets. And I think when people say, what is going to make the biggest difference in my health and well-being that I'm going to notice, I always say minerals.
Well, and that's why, back to your point about supplementation, it would be great if we could just snap our fingers and go back to
Yep.
when these things were in the soil. But, the likelihood is no matter how much of a purist or a completist you are, you're probably not eating an 100% regenerative. I don't know. Rick might be down there in Costa Rica, but he might be one of the few, unless you're just surrounded, you're growing everything. I think most of us have to sort of compromise at some level,
Yep.
what we're eating. We can't have everything be perfect. And that's, of course, where supplementation comes in, correcting deficiencies, but also looking for optimal intake. And with the trace minerals, it's really hard, and I always tell people, I think with trace minerals, it's much more, and I'm speaking to the ultra trace minerals, technically, I guess, something like iron is a trace mineral, even though, it's very abundant in the Earth's crust, and you need, what do we figure out? You need like 18 some milligrams of it as an adult, in that vicinity, right? So that's not the trace amount. That's more like a macro amount. But I'm talking about the ultra trace minerals. Like, tell me what's a USRDA for ytterbium, right? And
Yeah.
that's always my punchline. Give them some mineral they've never heard. And it's like, well, just because there isn't a deficiency syndrome or a deficiency symptom identified, it doesn't mean that we wouldn't benefit from having a little bit of a broad spectrum. So it's that broad spectrum theory, a little bit of a lot of things rather than just focusing on mega doses of macronutrients. Not that those aren't important, because it is important to get enough iron, but that broad spectrum of trace minerals complements that. And then, my favorite trace minerals, is no secret, are the humic fulvic trace minerals, because you have one of the key phrases, I think, in regenerative and holistic agriculture and medicine, cofactors. You have this synergy, the synergistic effect of a symphony of players, not just a soloist. Like, let's just take calcium for bone health and leave it at that. Well, okay, that's not how it was for thousands of years that our bodies were evolving. So I think we're missing some of the potential benefit, and studies, show this over and over again. It's not like we're just guessing, based on ancient history. It's that idea that nature put it there for a reason. I feel like that idea, that principle, is validated in the literature just over and over again. And it's kind of common sense, but we can't just rely on that. We have to show, with research, that these minerals have an effect. And you can look at trace mineral research. There's not a large body of it, because no big corporation is pumping huge amounts of dollars into it, but it's compelling and it makes sense. It's like things evolve a certain way for reasons,
Let's talk about those minerals. Let's talk about where they come from. And I know you've already mentioned it, but I feel the same way about B vitamins. People will come in the health food store and they'll say, well, I take B12. Yeah, but do you take a B complex? No, I just take B12. And I said, well, there's 11 Bs under the category, and there are 11 brothers and sisters, and they all get along, and they're all needed on the farm to do something that takes 11 of them to make the farm run. Otherwise, the one guy's running around doing everything, and he's not going to last very long. He's going to poop out really quickly. So synergism is very important. And I think with minerals, it's very, very important. But talk a little bit about minerals in general, and, of course, your favorite combination blend and where it comes from.
Okay, yeah. So the black earth minerals that the food movement makes easily, I guess my favorite. I became aware of fulvic minerals later than any other kind of supplement. And I like to use the phrase best kept secret
Mhm.
because, so Shilajit is a form of humates. It's a form of humic fulvic minerals, become very popular on social media lately, and that's kind of just taken off in the culture, right? But it was in Ayurveda thousands of years ago. Like none of this is new. It's when we see an herb get popular, right? Like a Gutu Kola or something. It's like, well, that's trending. While that may be true, and it's a great herb, right? It's not that any of these are bad. It's just that what's old is new again. You get used to that. But I swear, standing in a health food store in the mid 90s, I did not hear anyone come in talking about fulvic acid
Nope.
in any context. And in fact,
Mm-mm.
so much so that about 10 years ago, when I became aware of some of the properties of humate minerals. So not just fulvic acid, but humic acid, they're always together, and those over 70 trace minerals, and I started to look into it, and there is a lot of science more at some point from the agricultural standpoint and more from like livestock, which is amazing. Like they've done livestock research using humic acid to reduce cadmium based on chickens, research in chickens. Well, the same is also true in other species, such as human beings, right? But there was no focus on this from the human nutrition and from supplement standpoint. Even Shilajit. I mean, there were entire Ayurvedic lines for sale in our stores in the 90s, and there might have been one or two SKUs of Shilajit out there somewhere, but it is just very obscure. It was not a focus. And when I started to look at the research, kind of fast forward to the past 10 years, and I'm talking to a naturopathic doctor, and I'm, talking about this product, Black Earth Fulvic, that the food movement makes, which is basically just a broad spectrum humic fulvic trace mineral supplement. And he grabs it and he says, "This is the supplement that makes all your other supplements work better." And I was just like, can I use that? I'm not bold enough to do that kind of marketing. I think you want to under promise and over deliver. But what he was kind of putting lightning in a bottle there was this powerful stuff.
Mhm.
You look at some of the literature and you'd think that they're like fawning over this nutrient. These are scientists, and it's because fulvic acid in particular is so rich in oxygen. It's such a great chaperone. That's where humates come from. To bring this full circle, Shilajit and every other kind of humate is made from generally very, very old plant material. So it's part of the cycle of life. It's in that compost pile. It's in your Dr. Ohhira's probiotics. It's part of the magic, and I just hear different people talk about it different ways, but it's really fascinating to me when there's something like that in natural medicine that's kind of like enough under the surface that I'm like, I missed that one. I knew about all those B vitamins you're talking about. Very early on, I formed that opinion that, look, if I had a philosophy, it was based on holism. All of this is holistic medicine. So it is important to look that you're getting the whole picture, that you're getting all of the pieces of the puzzle. You want a broad spectrum, not an isolate. You want all of the B complex in some amount, not just one B vitamin. And with minerals, you want this broad spectrum of trace minerals. And I came to believe you want that broad spectrum of trace minerals as they occur in nature with both humic and fulvic acid. It's part of the life cycle. And the same way that nature makes those nutrients available to plants and fungi and all sorts of living things, it makes them available to us, to human beings, in the form of Shilajit or Black Earth Minerals is a North American sourced form of Black Earth minerals. Whereas Shilajit generally you're talking about from either I guess it could be the Altai Mountains or the Himalayan mountains. But it's all really, when you get into humates, it's just really old plant material, and it's gone through this process of breaking down, and to see this research that it's even in a compost pile or even in a fermented food. You really don't have to ferment it for that long. These humates like shilajit is formed over sometimes millions of years, maybe, very, very old, um, at least many thousands, right?
Sure.
And but it can also be formed relatively quickly when these things break down. So it's so interesting to look at all the different levels of it.
Well, let me ask you a question. Are there different groups of people that are more candidates for using these minerals, or are we across the board, we can all get the benefit?
I think across the board, everybody could use at least a little bit. There's kind of no reason why not. Like I said, the chaperone factor, the factor the fact that fulvic acid makes other things more available, particularly minerals, but not just minerals. I mean, there's studies on fulvic acid and pomegranate juice having a synergistic combination. And so I think part of that is that fulvic acid potentiates other ingredients, um, including those minerals, which occur next to it in nature. So I think when you put that together, and you could take trace minerals that don't have any fulvic acid. You could get some, extracted from shale or sea vegetables, wherever they're getting it, and that would be good. It's good to get a broad spectrum of minerals. I could be a little biased, but I tend to feel like taking them with fulvic acid is better, because you're going to absorb more of it. Again, it's not we're not what we eat. We are what we absorb and assimilate into our cells. And I think fulvic acid being that amazing chaperone, bringing oxygen, getting these nutrients into the cells. And then you've got the 1-2 punch of fulvic and humic, where humic is more a detoxifier. I mean, they both are interrelated, but fulvic is bringing nutrients into the cells. Humic acid, to some extent, is bringing waste products out of the cells. So it's this wonderful cycle of how things work in nature, right? This is going on
True.
all the time in living things.
Do you prefer it in liquid form?
Oh, I do. Yeah. I mean, although, um, we're not here to do product talk, but I mean, Alkalize 55 is one of the products the food movement makes that I'm really, really fond of. And it's 50/50 blend of fermented foods that Dr. Michio Kushi put together, and then 50% of black earth mineral extract, just so the humic and fulvic and over 70 minerals. What I really like about the powder, and I don't know, Trip Campbell.
Yeah.
So I was talking to Trip about this, and he kind of said, "Well, how much are you really going to get in one capsule?" That's the question. And I said, well, "I'll tell you what you should do. You should take one capsule of Alkalize 55 and put it in a glass of water and leave it there. And you come back, you don't have to wait that long. It's not in stomach acid, so it won't be quite as quickly as it would be if you swallowed the capsule. But even in that water, with that uh, relatively neutral pH, right? The capsule will break down, and then you'll see the black minerals, the humic and the fulvic acid, and all those minerals dissolving out into the water, and you suddenly have so much more than this tiny little capsule. It's like soup. Every humate, in a way, is super concentrated. It's true with shilajit too.
Yes, true.
You see people just take a little bit and they put it in some water, and then it just kind of goes, and it looks really cool the way that it dissolves out, because it's so dark. It's very visual, and I think that's part of the reason Shilajit blew up on TikTok, was they had all those videos. I mean, there's many reasons, right? One was I think the testosterone effect that a lot of you know a lot of guys in particular were looking at. But I think it is something I like to take in liquid form. But even if you take it in a capsule, you know this. I mean, it very quickly breaks down, but it's just seeing it visually. It just reminded me of how concentrated it is. And then I talked to Tripp, and he came back and he said, I did that, and it is actually really cool. He said I had to shake it a little bit. I'm like, okay, fair enough. You probably got to, stimulate some kind of motion, but it does break down very easily and then just dissipate. And then you have these over 70, mineral elements. In that formula, you have over 50 triple fermented macrobiotic food elements. That's one of my favorite. You just the number of things, the spectrum, you go from like a broad spectrum to like just this incredibly wide spectrum.
How much do you use of the liquid every day?
I tend to rotate what I take. I really like a product. Actually, I have it right here, but the Ultimate Trace Minerals 10X is 10X concentrated from our original Black Earth Fulvic. And I used to carry around an 8-ounce bottle. The Food Movement is a plastic-free company, so this is a glass bottle. They don't break very often, but when they do, it makes a real mess. So if you got an 8-ounce glass bottle in your gym bag, it's a little more likely to fall out or get broken or, what have you. It's just cumbersome. So having something, more concentrated to where you could take just 20 drops. And here's where I got to put my sales and marketing hat on, but it's just true that the Ultimate Trace Minerals 10X was the first time with the Black Earth Minerals that we did ISO testing. So the International Standards Organization, because as a lot of this stuff was not well known, 20, 30 years ago, it's been a little bit of a wild, wild west. Some of the companies that have been selling fulvic minerals, I hate to say not all of them are like normal natural health companies in terms of standards. I mean, I'm not here to bash anybody, but
No.
we all know that good manufacturing practices are important. I feel like for every company, right? And when I first started looking into it, I found out that there were companies and suppliers that were just pulling humic minerals and humic substances out of the ground and not doing a whole lot else before they sold it to people. And so one thing I think is really important, and I know we're totally on the same page on this, is that you do testing. The bare minimum would be safety testing. Got to make sure you do microbiological testing to make sure there's no contamination, especially when you're getting something out of the soil. And you got to make sure that heavy metals are not a concern. There's not concerning levels of heavy metals in there, especially with humates. All right, because they tend to have an affinity for minerals. But then the ISO testing that we started doing with 10X, we can now say just 20 drops has 100 milligrams of fulvic acid and 10 milligrams of humic acid. So let's say for doctors, or just herbalists or anyone who wants to quantify how much, maybe it's a child and they only need 10 drops or 5 drops. Maybe that child only needs 25 milligrams of these black earth minerals. So it's just, I felt like the ISO testing, not only did the 10X concentrate the product, but quantifying it kind of put it in a new light to me, where it's like, now we can be a little more precise rather than just saying, just put a dab of this, black mineral pitch in your water and just, it's great. I drink a ton of it. And I do. You can be a little loose with your own health. I've taken more of these things than I might recommend everyone take. And I know what's safe and I feel comfortable, but we always, I know you agree, err on the side of caution when it comes to the public and their health. So we really just want to dial it in on how much should I take? And you probably don't want to take as much as I do, because, I know how safe it is that I have taken just mega doses, which you probably don't need to, unless you're really sick or something like that. A little bit goes a long way.
And I believe the same thing, testing, erring on the side of caution, and low and slow. Because some people react to things in a very small dosage, small serving size, and it's a lot easier to start with a little bit less and work your way up progressively, listening to your body and the results that you're getting, than take a massive amount that might work well, but what if you don't need it? What if you can get by with less? So I've always been, kind of along the lines of low and slow, especially when something's this safe. The reason I asked you is I use about like 15 to 20 drops a day.
Oh,
So,
nice.
and I spread them in my water bottles during the day. So, and of course I take them when I travel, and I like the little bottle, so it's a lot easier for me.
Yeah, that's so awesome. Yeah, I feel the same way. It's nice to have product. George Carlin had this routine about your stuff, right? So we talked about this one. Yeah, yeah. The only reason you got a house because you have a place to put your stuff, and then you go on a trip and you got to have a smaller version of your stuff. And it's so true. Having to choose. I don't know if you ever go through this, but having to choose which supplements to take is kind of an art form, and it sort of makes me think this is how most people who won't have the cabinet of herbs that we probably do, would not be practical to ask them to amass this much of an array of supplements, and because they're foods and they're herbs, and it's in my cabinet next to the salts and the different things that we use making food. But what do you take with you,
Yep.
right? I take a multivitamin, I take a liquid mineral, I take the 10x, and usually because you're trying to save space for whatever else you're clothes or you know um, just the maybe work things. Space is at a premium when you travel, and it is also nice with the smaller bottles. If you're going through, I'm sure you've run into this with TSA.
Yep.
That was another thing that inspired the concentrate. The first time TSA took a bottle of Black Earth Minerals from me because we only it was like, man, do you know what you have there? You shouldn't throw that away. But I think it's to make a more practical product, to make a more portable product is to make a more practical product, probably.
I lay a towel down and I make my packs, and I have a morning pack, a late morning pack. I've got a lunch pack, an afternoon, and a dinner pack. So, I mean, I have these different, so ADD and OCD, XYZ, 1, 2, 3, I'm all of them, but I have baskets. So like when I travel, if I'm going to be gone for so many days, then I just have to take the quantity from the baskets because I already made them. But then, of course, even worse, I carry a Tupperware container. I put my 2 favorite protein powders in there with chia seeds and ground flax. I use 3 of the Kokora powders. I pour those in there, and I carry little Tupperware containers and a blender. And then wherever I am, I get almond milk and fruit.
All right,
So that
you had me at blender. I was like, I'm following you, but when you said you take a blender with you, I mean, we're talking like an electric blender.
it's like a bullet. It's
Oh,
smaller.
okay. All right.
It's still a blend.
I was picturing
No,
a Vitamix in your bag.
no, I have done that over the years, but that was a very long time ago, and
Which would
technology
be
has
awesome.
been.
It would be
but
awesome to bring a Vitamix in your luggage.
But this works out great. I mean, I can have it in the morning. Sometimes I don't want to, but I do it anyway. And I know that I've got that in me. And then I just have my packs in my pocket. And sometimes I'm so busy doing what I'm doing out in the industry that sometimes I have to do 2 or 3 packs at one meal because I miss the other 2 meals. I get them in, the bags are all empty at the end of the day. But the thing is, if it wasn't done that way and I wasn't organized that way, I wouldn't get them all in. And, when you're not a kid anymore, there's a chance your nutrients are for today's good health, not for the golden down the road. We're using them for today's health. So it's
Well,
kind
and
of a
that's why
different.
you look and sound as good as you do, because you're taking care of yourself, and that, whatever it is, the OCD or just your commitment to that level of health, I'll say, because I think if it's a positive thing like that, maybe it's, I guess OCD could be a negative thing. I'm over focusing on this, but, I think being meticulous about your health and being consistent is what most people are like craving. They're like, man, I wish I could get myself to that point, but it would take all this effort I don't want to put forth. And most people don't get to the place, or I'll say all too many people. I don't want to say most, but all too many people don't get to that place until they get sick.
Yep.
And it's like they don't get motivated. People don't usually change till there's some big motivator like, oh, it's just not going well. I got to do what I can. And it's, what do they say? An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. And, knock on wood, we're all blessed to be here. I'm not trying to say we have all the answers, but some things just become clear to you. Simpler is better sometimes. Maybe I don't need 50,000 individual antioxidant nutrients when I can have a broad spectrum of phytonutrients that occur together. Nature made these perfect packages in certain plants, and you go for those. What are the most nutrient dense? Our industry discovered many years ago spirulina,
Yep.
And things like that, spirulina or chlorella, these nutrient dense plants. And a lot of these herbs we're talking about are just naturally loaded with all this activity, all these phytonutrients and vitamins and minerals that work together. So you're absolutely right. I don't have to, not that I have to tell you, but to focus on that. And I think it really helps. At least in my life, has helped me, enjoy life more, because, life isn't perfect. No one's health is perfect, but I know I'm so much better off than if I had never discovered green juice, or just trace minerals or the B complex, all these things, and a whole foods diet and positive thinking, just so much good. If I go back to that first health food store, where I discovered a lot of this stuff, it just makes you think. If I had never, for me, it was from working in the record store as a clerk while I was going to college to working as a clerk in the health food store. And you talk about like those moments that you're just thankful. I am so thankful I walked in the door. And I can remember the person that suggested I go apply there, and I'll say a quiet thanks to her, go in there and apply. You're vegan. You're always, I'm not anymore, but I was at the time. And you're always talking about, tofu and whatnot. Why don't you go apply at the Natural Health Superstore? And I think, do you remember the first health food store that you ever went into?
I do. My grandmother was amazing because she was always picking dandelions out of the yard, making dandelion tea. And we used to go to the forest to pick mushrooms. She was doing functional mushrooms and stuff when we were kids. She had a pot on her stove that I think never came off that stove for 30 years. And she just kept adding chicken and onions and garlic to it. She was making bone broth before bone broth was bone broth. And when you went to her house, you got a cup when you came into her house, and you just drank it because that's the way it was. She was Ukrainian and Polish and stubborn and brilliant. And so she created the bug in me. But I'll never forget, I was going to college and I needed a little something part-time. I would wait on tables on my time off and weekends, but there was a little place, it was a little store, and it was a candy store. And at the back of the candy store, there was a counter, and half of it was vitamins and half of it was cigarettes. I kid you not. And there was a lady behind the cigarette counter who knew so much about vitamins, but she smoked like 5 packs a day. So I learned a lot from her, working part-time behind this little vitamin counter. And at the time, we were considered snake oil and witchcraft and all that kind of crazy stuff because, my first 10 years, you were still fighting the battle, against the medical establishment. But I'll never forget the first day I walked in. I can't forget this. I walked in and I introduced myself, and she was actually smoking. There was a window there, out the window while she was at her counter. And then she said, "I'll teach you everything you need to know." and I was like, oh my goodness. But I learned a lot from her. And then I graduated, went to Los Angeles, met Dr. Earl Mandel, started working with him and his chain of stores. He's the one that gave me my first microphone. I never gave it back, and so yes, I remember those. Those were pivotal times that you can't forget, because you are where you are today because of those things.
Well, and I remember the first, there were two health food stores. I grew up in Winston-Salem, North Carolina, and there were two health food stores that are not there anymore. One was called Aquarius 2000, and the other one was called Friends of the Earth.
Oh my.
Two pretty crunchy names, as our industry is apt to have. But Friends of the Earth was run by Tom and Boyce. I know Boyce has passed. I'm not sure what's happened to Tom. I got to ask some friends, but I just walked in like wet behind the ears, right? And I just had no idea, and what I was doing in life was not working for me. I was eating bad food, eating at McDonald's or eating at Burger King. I worked at Burger King. Sorry, probably shouldn't name names, but
It's all good.
I don't think they'll sue you, Jeff.
I don't think so.
But yeah, and I remember she gave me some samples of Source of Life by Nature's Plus. And they used to have that little pack of, one day's serving was 3 horse pills.
Massive.
And, guaranteed burst of energy, and for somebody just coming from middle America, drinking Coca-Cola, eating Burger King, I took those 3 vitamins and I came back the very next day with cash in hand. It was like crack, like how much is the whole bottle, But it was life-changing. And, and I went vegan after that, and I did so many things because I just started to educate myself, and I had focused when I was growing up, I focused a lot of my energy on music. I could tell you everything about, every rock and roll band. I'd read all their biographies and all this stuff, but my own health was a mystery that I hadn't really spent much time on. And to have that eye-opening experience in a health food store, and what I've found, and I'm sure, this is probably similar for you, what I've found over the past, oh my God, I don't want to name the number of years, is that like every time I walk into a health food store, almost every time it is like an eye-opening experience if you look closely enough, and if you talk to people, and if you ask questions. And I just, I'm always looking like, what local products do they have? Oh, they've got local raw honey, they're doing raw dairy, and they're all these different things, and not all of them are great and fantastic. There's good, there's bad, there's a spectrum of stuff, but so many different things where the main conduit for it, the main focal point of these, healthy natural alternatives is this little mom and pop shop that you might easily miss if you really didn't know, to go in there.
I love it. We could talk forever. I thank you so much for being here today. 3 things. First of all, will you come back and see me again?
Oh, 100%, anytime.
Number 2, where can people find your minerals?
Oh, okay. So if you go to www.thefoodmovement.com, there's a store locator in that top bar. Of course, you can buy them online. You can buy everything online. But I really do encourage people, because of all the things you and I are getting so excited about here, to go to that store locator at thefoodmovement.com and to find something in their area and go check out a store you haven't seen before. I really think that's what, I don't know, man, it's part of the package, isn't it? You gotta buy the ticket and take the ride,
I agree. My number 3, leave us with a thought for the day.
Well, my thought for the day would be, I am so thankful for this continuum of knowledge that you and I have a part of. Everybody's got everybody's got a piece of the puzzle, right? None of us are, the sole point of knowledge, but there's this continuum of knowledge. You and I talk about these people from long, long ago, thousands of years ago, and here we are. You and I have the privilege to be here in this moment. And how about we'll end with something simple like you know, this moment is a gift, and that's why they call it the present.
I love it. I love it. I hope you guys enjoyed this today. I've been speaking with Rob Seeman. Definitely, you can follow him all over social media as well. If you like what you're hearing, go to my webpage, drjeffreyburke.com, tap on the Honest Health logo. You'll actually go to Spotify, tap on the YouTube logo, and you'll go to my YouTube channel. Make sure to like and follow and subscribe and all that fun stuff. Rob, thank you for being here today.
Thanks, Jeff. I really appreciate it. It's always a pleasure. And got to have you on Whole Earth Radio sometime soon.
I would love to do that. Thank you for the enlightenment. Thank you for the time. Thank you for all your energy. And thank you for the blessings you bring to the industry every day.
Thank you, man. I really appreciate it, Jeff.
Have a great day, everyone. Be well. God bless.
Stay tuned for more information from the Honest Health Podcast with Jeffrey Burke. And make sure to check back often for interviews and conversations from the guests we all want to hear from. I'm John the Announcer. Thanks for listening.